Welcome to the channel. If epic sci-fi stories are your thing, you've just found your new home. Subscribe, like, and share the adventure. The war was over before it began. At least that's what Admiral Kane believed as she watched the massive Dominion fleet emerge from hyperspace, their obsidian ships blotting out the stars like a spreading infection. 300 vessels against Earth's pitiful defense fleet of 27 ships. The mathematics were simple, brutal, and final. "Admiral," Lieutenant Hayes called from the communications console, his voice cracking despite his best efforts to remain professional. "The Dominion is transmitting on all frequencies. They're demanding our surrender." Kane stood, motionless on the bridge of the ESS Defiance, humanity's flagship, watching the enemy formation spread across the void like a dark tide. She had fought in 7 major conflicts, had seen civilizations rise and fall, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Dominion Empire, comprised of 12 allied species, had swept across the galaxy for 3 centuries, absorbing or destroying every world in their path. Now they had come for Earth. "Patch me through to the fleet," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. All channels. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Every officer, every crew member on every human ship would hear her words. These might be the last words of the human race. "This is Admiral Kane to all ships." She began, her hands clasped behind her back. "I won't lie to you, we're outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched. Our enemy has conquered worlds that had technology we can barely comprehend. They've crushed civilizations that had millions of years to prepare for this moment." She paused, looking out at the stars that had called to humanity since they first looked up from their caves, and wondered what lay beyond the darkness. But they've never faced humans before. They've never encountered a species that built pyramids while other races were still learning to make fire. They've never met a people who looked at an impossible ocean and decided to cross it in wooden boats. They've never fought beings who stared at the moon and said, "We're going to walk on that thing," on the enemy flagship. General Thorne of the Dominion High Command studied the tactical display with growing impatience. The human fleet was pathetically small, their ships primitive by Dominion standards. This would be another routine conquest, another species to add to their growing empire. "Sir," his aide reported, "the humans are refusing to surrender. Their leader is giving some kind of speech." Thorne's 4 eyes narrowed. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever refused the Dominion's initial demand for surrender. It was considered tactical suicide. Back on the Defiance, Admiral Kane continued her address. "Today, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every story never told, every dream never realized, every child who won't have the chance to look up at the stars and wonder. We're fighting for the right to exist as ourselves, not as subjects of an empire that sees us as nothing more than another resource to exploit. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you." Lieutenant Hayes watched his instruments as something unprecedented happened across the human fleet. Power readings were spiking on every ship, not from weapons or engines, but from something else entirely. The communications arrays were lighting up like Christmas trees, transmitting not just to each other, but broadcasting into the void. "Admiral," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "every ship in the fleet is transmitting. They're sharing their stories." The broadcast began as a whisper across the void, then grew into a symphony of human experience. Captain Maria Rodriguez of the escort vessel Courage transmitted the story of her grandmother, who had fled persecution on Earth only to become a pioneer on Mars. Commander James Park of the destroyer Hope shared the tale of his ancestor, a A farmer who had survived 3 wars and still planted seeds each spring, believing in tomorrow. Thorn watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships weren't moving into defensive positions. They weren't charging their weapons or deploying countermeasures. Instead, they were talking. What are they transmitting? He demanded. His communications officer, a tall crystalline being named Vel, tilted her head as she analyzed the data streams. Stories, sir. Personal histories, cultural narratives, individual experiences. They're broadcasting the chronicles of their civilization. Thorn's confusion turned to irritation. Are they trying to distract us? Some primitive psychological warfare? I don't believe so, sir. The transmissions appear to be genuine. They're sharing memories, experiences, the story of their species' journey from their homeworld to the stars. On the human ship Resilience, Chief Engineer Marcus Thompson spoke into his personal log, knowing it would be transmitted to every vessel in both fleets. My great-great-grandfather was a coal miner on Earth. He spent his entire life underground, never seeing sunlight during his working days. But every night, he would tell his children about the stars, about the worlds that might exist beyond the darkness. He died never knowing that his descendant would one day repair the engines that carry humanity between those very stars. The stories multiplied, each one a thread in the tapestry of human experience. Dr. Elena Vasquez shared the tale of the first human to perform surgery in zero gravity, a desperate procedure that saved a child's life and revolutionized medicine across the galaxy. Pilot Alex Chun told of his mother, a woman who had lost her legs in an accident, but designed the first adaptive controls that allowed disabled humans to fly STARSH. As the stories flowed, something unexpected happened aboard the Dominion vessels. The alien crews, despite their commander's orders, began to listen. The Zephyrians, known for their logical minds, found themselves puzzled by the humans' willingness to share personal pain alongside triumph. The Kurtani, a warrior species that valued only strength, were confused by stories of humans who found courage not in conquest, but in creation. Captain Sarah Kim of the human vessel Endeavor broadcast a simple message that would change everything. We are not warriors by nature. We are storytellers. We are the species that paints on cave walls and builds monuments to remember our dead. We are the people who look at emptiness and see possibility. We are the ones who believe that every ending can become a new beginning. Admiral Kane watched as her tactical officer reported something unprecedented in the history of galactic warfare. Admiral, we're detecting communication chatter among the Dominion fleet. Their formation is loosening. On the Dominion flagship, General Thorn faced a crisis unlike any in his military career. Report. He barked at his communications officer. Vel's crystalline features flickered with uncertainty. Sir, the crews are discussing the human transmissions. Some are asking questions about their own histories, their own stories before joining the Dominion. Impossible, Thorn snarled. We are the Dominion. We are unity. We are strength. But even as he spoke, he could see the truth in his tactical display. Ships were dropping out of formation, not to retreat or attack, but to listen. The humans had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. They had made the Dominion question itself. The broadcast continued, each story adding another layer to the growing understanding between the two fleets. The humans spoke of failure and redemption, of loss and hope, of the countless small moments that defined a civilization. They shared their music, their art, their dreams of a future where different species could coexist without one subjugating the other. And in the depths of space, surrounded by the machinery of war, something beautiful began to happen. The galaxy's most powerful empire began to remember what it had forgotten in its centuries of conquest, that every species, every world, every individual had a story worth telling. The first crack in the Dominion's unity came from an unexpected Source: Sub-Commander Nix, a young Zephyrian aboard the destroyer Dominance, had been listening to the human transmissions for nearly an hour when he made a decision that would reverberate across the galaxy. He opened the channel to his own ship's crew. "My name is Nix," he began, his voice trembling with nervousness and determination. "Before I joined the Dominion, I lived on Zephyr Prime in a small settlement near the Crystal Caverns. My family were lightweavers, artists who created beauty from photons and hope. When the Dominion came to our world, they told us our art was inefficient, that our creativity served no military purpose. They said we must become soldiers or supply technicians." The bridge of the Dominance fell silent. Personal histories were forbidden in the Dominion. Individual identity was considered a weakness that undermined unity. "I chose to serve," Nix continued, "because I believed the Dominion would protect my people. But I never stopped creating light patterns in my mind, never stopped dreaming of the caverns where my ancestors made beauty from nothing but imagination and willpower." General Thorne's command center erupted in chaos as similar transmissions began appearing across the fleet. A Kurtani warrior spoke of her grandmother's songs. A hegemony engineer shared memories of building toys for his children before the Dominion recruited him. A Nexus navigator described the poetry of her homeworld, verses that spoke of stars as friends rather than destinations to conquer. "Shut down all internal communications." Thorne ordered, but it was too late. The human stories had awakened something that had been sleeping in the hearts of the Dominion's diverse crews. Admiral Kane watched in amazement as her communications officer reported the unprecedented development. "Admiral, we're receiving direct transmissions from individual Dominion ships. They're sharing their own stories now." Lieutenant Hayes looked up from his console, his eyes wide with wonder. "Ma'am, something else is happening. The Dominion fleet is fragmenting. Ships are breaking away from their formations, but they're not attacking. They're just drifting." On the human ship Perseverance, Captain David Lee made a decision that would define the next phase of the encounter. He opened a channel directly to the Dominion flagship. "General Thorne," he said, his voice carrying across the void, "my name is David Lee. I am the son of refugees, the grandson of farmers, and the great-grandson of dreamers. I want to tell you a story about my people, but first, I would like to hear yours." The request was so unprecedented, so contrary to everything the Dominion represented, that Thorne found himself speechless. In 3 centuries of conquest, no enemy had ever asked to hear the Dominion's story. They had always demanded surrender or defiance, never understanding. "I was born on Hegemony Prime," Thorne found himself saying, the words coming from a place he had thought the Dominion had buried forever. "My birth name was Kethvar. I was the 4th son of a metal singer, a craftsman who made instruments that could harmonize with the wind itself." The admission sent shockwaves through both fleets. General Thorne, the architect of a dozen conquests, was sharing his personal history with the enemy. "The Dominion came to our world when I was barely old. Enough to hold a hammer," he continued, his voice carrying decades of buried emotion. "They said our music was primitive, our art was wasteful. They gave us purpose, direction, unity. They gave us the strength to bring order to the galaxy." Captain Lee's response was gentle, understanding. "But they also took something from you, didn't they? They took your name, your father's songs, your people's way of seeing the universe." The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. Across both fleets, beings who had been enemies moments before found themselves listening to the same truth, that conquest without understanding was just another form of destruction. Dr. Elena Vasquez of the medical vessel Mercy opened a channel to the Dominion fleet. "We don't want to fight you," she said simply. "We want to understand you. We want to learn your stories, share our own, and find a way to coexist that doesn't require one of us to disappear." The response came not from General Thorne, but from the young Zephyrian who had started the cascade of revelations. Is that possible? Sub-Commander Nix asked. Can different species truly coexist without one absorbing the other? Admiral Kane stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of hope and determination. That's exactly what we're proposing. Not surrender, not conquest, but cooperation. A galaxy where every species, every world, every individual has the right to tell their own story. The transformation began slowly, like dawn breaking over a world that had known only darkness. Ships from both fleets started moving toward each other, not with the aggressive posturing of war, but with the cautious hope of first contact. The Dominion's rigid formation dissolved into something organic, flowing, as individual commanders made choices their empire had never allowed them to make. General Thorne stood alone on his bridge, watching his fleet fragment around him. 3 centuries of absolute authority crumbling in a matter of hours, undone not by superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but by something far more powerful, the simple act of sharing personal truth. Sir, his aide approached hesitantly. The Council is demanding an immediate report. They want to know why we haven't begun the assault. Thorne looked at the young officer, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Tell me, Cadet Iran, what was your name before you joined the Dominion? The question was forbidden, dangerous, potentially treasonous, but something in Thorne's eyes encouraged honesty. Irantel, sir, I was a star mapper on Lunar Station 7. I loved charting new systems, finding worlds that might harbor life. And now I plot courses for conquest fleets. The admission came out as a whisper, heavy with years of suppressed regret. Thorne nodded slowly. Tell the Council that we have encountered something unprecedented. Tell them that we are negotiating. Meanwhile, on the human vessel Defiance, Admiral Kane was orchestrating the most unusual diplomatic mission in galactic history. Her communications array was alive with transmissions from dozens of Dominion ships, each one sharing stories that had been buried for decades under the weight of Imperial conformity. Commander, Lisa Turner of the human ship Valor was speaking. With Captain Vesari, a Kurtani warrior whose ship had been one of the first to break formation. You say your people were warriors before the Dominion, Turner said. But what did you fight for? We fought for the right to exist as ourselves, Vesari replied, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. We fought to protect our young, our elders, our way of life. The Dominion convinced us that fighting for them was the same thing. But conquering others isn't the same as protecting your own, Turner finished gently. No, it is not. And somewhere in the centuries of conquest, we forgot what we were originally fighting for. Similar conversations were happening across the void. The Zephyrian Lightweavers shared their art with human engineers, creating displays of beauty that neither species could have achieved alone. Hegemony metallurgists exchanged techniques with human craftsmen, discovering that their different approaches to shaping matter could complement each other rather than compete. Commander, Nix had become an unofficial ambassador, his ship serving as a meeting point between the two fleets. He found himself in conversation with Dr. Elena Vasquez, sharing stories of the Crystal Caverns while learning about Earth's own natural wonders. The Dominion taught us that diversity was weakness, Nix said, his crystalline features shimmering with emotion. They said that unity required uniformity, that strength came from everyone thinking the same thoughts, pursuing the same goals. But that's not unity, Dr. Vasquez replied. That's just emptiness. True unity comes from different voices finding harmony, not from everyone singing the same note. The breakthrough came when Captain Maria Rodriguez of the Courage made a proposal that would change everything. What if we stopped thinking about this as two separate fleets? She suggested over the open channel. What if we started thinking about this as one gathering of beings from across the galaxy, all of us trying to find our way home? General Thorne, who had been listening to the conversations with growing fascination, found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "And where is home, Captain Rodriguez?" "Home is wherever we can be ourselves," she replied. "Home is wherever our stories are welcomed, our differences celebrated, our similarities honored. Home is what we create when we stop trying to conquer each other and start trying to understand each other." The silence that followed was profound. Across both fleets, beings who had been enemies were beginning to see each other as fellow travelers. On the same journey through the cosmos. It was then that the impossible happened. The Dominion ship Eternal, commanded by Captain Zareth of the Nexus Collective, transmitted a message that would echo through history. "We formally request permission to join the human fleet, not as conquerors or conquered, but as friends." The Findas. Word hung in the space between the fleets like a bridge spanning an impossible chasm. Friends. It was a concept the Dominion had systematically eliminated from its vocabulary. A weakness that had no place in an empire built on strength and unity. But as ship after ship began transmitting similar requests, it became clear that the galaxy's most powerful military force was choosing friendship over conquest, understanding over domination, stories over silence. The Battle of Terra, as historians would later call it, ended not with the thunder of weapons or the screams of the dying, but with the soft whisper of beings choosing to lay down their arms and pick up their stories. What had begun as humanity's last stand became the galaxy's first true peace. Admiral Kane stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, watching as human and Dominion ships moved together in formations that had never existed before. The rigid, militaristic patterns of the Dominion had given way to something organic, flowing, beautiful. Ships moved like dancers, like musicians in an orchestra, each one maintaining its own identity while contributing to a greater harmony. "Admiral," Lieutenant Hayes approached, his voice filled with wonder. "We're receiving formal requests from 237 Dominion vessels. They're asking to defect from the Empire and join what they're calling the Coalition of Stories." Kane smiled. The first genuine smile she had worn in months. "Grant them all asylum. And Hayes, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're coming home and we're bringing friends." The transformation of General Thorne was perhaps the most remarkable of all. The man who had conquered worlds now found himself working alongside Admiral Kane to establish protocols for the unprecedented merger of two fleets. His military expertise, combined with his newfound understanding of cooperation over conquest, made him uniquely qualified to help design a new kind of interstellar organization. "The Dominion will come for us," he warned during one of their planning sessions. "When they learn what has happened here, they will consider us all traitors. The remaining fleet will not be as receptive as we have been." "Then we'll be ready for them," Kane replied. "Not with weapons, but with stories. We'll show them what we've learned here, what we've discovered about the power of understanding over subjugation." The new coalition established its first joint colony on a small moon orbiting the gas giant Kepler-9. It was a modest settlement, but it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. A community where multiple species lived together, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to the common good. Sub-Commander Nix, now calling himself by his birth name of Nixtel, became the colony's first light weaver, creating displays that told the story of the coalition's founding. His art was no longer hidden or forbidden, but celebrated as an essential part of the community's identity. Captain Vesari established the colony's first multi-species academy, where young beings from different worlds learned not just practical skills, but the stories and cultures of their neighbors. Her warrior's strength was now devoted to protecting, not through conquest, but through education and understanding. The ripple effects spread far beyond the small colony. Word of the coalition reached other worlds, other species that had been absorbed by the Dominion or threatened by its expansion. Rebellion movements found new hope, not in violence, but in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself at the center of the Coalition's growing diplomatic efforts. Her medical background, combined with her gift for listening to others' stories, made her uniquely suited to help heal the wounds left by centuries of conquest and domination. "We're not trying to destroy the Dominion," she explained to a gathering of refugee leaders from across the galaxy. "We're trying to show them that there's another way, a better way. We're trying to prove that strength comes not from making others like us, but from celebrating what makes us different." The Coalition's greatest test came when the Dominion's main fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to find a conquered Earth and a victorious general. Instead, they found something that challenged every assumption they had about power, victory, and the nature of civilization itself. Admiral Kane, now serving as the Coalition's first elected leader, stood ready to meet them. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. Beside her stood General Thorne, Sub-Commander Nixtel, Captain Vexari, and representatives from dozens of species who had chosen cooperation over conquest. "This is Admiral Kane of the Coalition of Stories," she transmitted to the approaching Dominion fleet. "We're not here to fight you, we're here to tell you a story. The story of how enemies became friends, how conquerors became builders, how the galaxy's strongest weapon turned out to be not a gun, but a simple human truth, that every being in the universe has a story worth telling, and that those stories are stronger than any weapon ever forged." The Dominion fleet slowed, then stopped, hanging in space like a question mark against the stars. And in that moment of hesitation, in that pause between war and peace, the Coalition of Stories prepared to share the most important tale of all, the story of how the galaxy learned to listen. The galaxy's strongest weapon wasn't a gun. It wasn't a ship or a shield or a sword. It was the simple, profound act of one being recognizing the worth and dignity of another. It was the power of stories to build bridges across the vast emptiness between worlds, between species, between hearts. And in the end, that was the only weapon that truly mattered.